Hello, everybody. I think you've all been working very hard today. I've heard that you've had many, many very interesting speakers. So thank you for staying this long. I would like to start with a few words of German. I'm not very good, but ich freue mich sehr, euch alle kennenzulernen. Ich freue mich sehr, wieder in Berlin zu sein. It's always good to be back in Berlin. It's always, always a pleasure to be here. And what I'm going to do this evening, and I do have to stick to my notes, I'm speaking 24 hours early, so I haven't learnt it all yet. But what I'm going to do this evening is reflect on the first time I ever came here, and the people I met, and the inventions and innovations that I saw at that time, and then see how they can help us look forward to the future. First of all, I'm a Liberal Democrat from the United Kingdom. We won't talk about Brexit, but I should say that I am a pro-European. I want Britain to remain in Europe, working alongside other sovereign nations who are our friends. But that's it, that's all I'm going to say, unless you ask. So, I'm a Liberal Democrat, I'm in the European Parliament, and I sit on two committees. Sorry, can you hear me? I forgot I've got microphones here. I sit on two committees, the Cultural and Education Committee and the Innovation, Industry, Education, the Industry, Energy and Research Committee. And what these two committees have in common is an interest in innovation and where we are going to go in the future for our skills and what skills we need to make all of the different countries across Europe and indeed across the whole world thrive. So I have spent a lot of time in the last few months thinking about the future of work, the future of skills, and where we should be looking. And that's what I want to try and draw on by looking back into the history of 30 years ago when the wall came down. Because the first time that... Can you hear me if I walk over here? I have a real problem standing still. Sorry.
It's not good, I think, because we're TV.
You're recording.
Yeah.
Okay, I will try and stand still. Forgive me. It's very hard when you...
There is microphone here.
Oh, do you have one I can walk about with? That would be great. Thank you.
Is that okay?
Do you think it can be? It's good
So
for
long
you
if it
like
works
this, so
for,
you can walk and you can speak. It's enough long, you know.
Yes. Fantastic. Just check. I don't want to pull the whole camera over. There we go. Ooh, I'll stand on the edge here. Sorry, I shouldn't be disrupting your technology, should I? So, basically, what I wanted to say was, I first came to Berlin in 1991. So the wall was only down for a couple of years, and it was still very, very evident in the middle of the city. And I don't know how many of you live here and how many of you are visitors. Who lives in Berlin and who is visiting from outside? You think, fine. Well, I don't know whether you were fortunate as visitors to come at that time. I missed 89. It looked amazing. Don't we all remember where we were? One of those moments like when JFK got shot and when the wall came down. But in 1991, I came to Berlin and I was a junior film director, and I was filming for a science magazine show called Tomorrow's World. And we film with inventors and scientists all over the UK, all over Europe, and I'd filmed in other parts of Germany. But when I came to Berlin, I was massively impressed by the quality of innovation and invention that we met here. And I talked to people on the eastern side. I mean, obviously it's an open city by then, but I talked to people in the east, I talked to inventors in the west. And reflecting now, I am even more impressed with the invention that was going on then, because, as I'll explain in a moment, some of it involved technologies and ideologies and ideas that had barely reached the UK. I don't know about the rest of Europe, but everyone in Berlin was ahead of their time. And that was quite remarkable, given the confinement of the previous 28 years. So, the first place that I'll talk about is the Potsdamer Platz. This was still an area which was known as the death zone. It was still evident. There was no development. There had been no building. The wall was down, but there was a wasteland. And the U-Bahn was unused, undeveloped. And one of the teams that I was filming with were the designers and architects who were going to develop the U-Bahn station. And what that meant for me was that I got to go and visit the Potsdamer Platz station while it was still closed, and there had not been a train running through there for many years, and it was dark and it was spooky, and it really gave you pause to think about the reason for this station being unused in the middle of a city. It was a very emotional moment, standing, not in the complete dark, obviously we had lights on, but standing there and just feeling the deprivation of society, if you like, everything that wasn't. And a number of things that have occurred to me as I've been writing this speech are absences, things that weren't there. And this experience in the Potsdamer Platz station was quite profound. The other place that I was able to visit on that, this was not to do with the innovation, but just as history and experience, was part of Hitler's bunker. And they still had the murals on the wall. I don't know what's available to see now. I don't know what's open. But at the time, I was taken in, and you'll be familiar with the images. They were stark. It's Nazi propaganda, but it was stylish and a bit like some Soviet propaganda, quite attractive artistically, but then you think about all that lies behind it and it makes you very uncomfortable indeed. So those two experiences in one morning, one was visiting the heart of the Nazi oppression, and one visiting a representative location for the oppression of communism. That was very profound. But then in the afternoon, I went to the company who was doing the designing and the architecture, and they were using virtual reality to help their design for the new station. Now, this is virtual reality. Oh, it's old hat now. But this was in 1991. None of us on this innovative technical show on the BBC had heard of virtual reality at this point. We were still learning about it. And it was fantastic. It was exciting to be able to put on the headset and to see what was happening. And one of my treats tomorrow is to go down to Potsdamer Platz and see how it's turned out now. See how it is. Because that was one of the, that was an example, I thought, of how we could see art and technical inspiration and science and architecture all coming together 30 years ahead of everybody else, 25 years ahead of everybody else. Another part of Berlin, which I spent a lot of time in at that time, was Kreuzberg. Have any of you visited Kreuzberg before? You know it? You're familiar with it? Well, back in the 90s, it was obviously right on the edge of the wall, still where it is now. But the wall had only just come down and was still in evidence in Kreuzberg, hugely. And people were living in communes. And the commune that I visited was massively environmentally aware. And this also strikes me looking back. In Britain, we've always cared about nature and the environment, and we have the National Trust and we look after our forests, but we weren't very environmentally aware at the end of the 80s, early 90s. Nobody was talking about climate change. I don't think those two words had been put together at the beginning of the 90s. But here I was in Berlin, looking at a commune where they had built, it was the first time I'd ever seen a green wall. So we had vertical horticulture where they were filtering grey water from baths and hand basins and so on, so that they could then use the water to water the plants, to grow vegetables, to eat. They were very concerned about water preservation and had simple inventions that we all take for granted now. You know, the little spray thing that goes on the end of your tap so that you use less water and it feels like you've got more when you're washing your hands. Tiny little things like this that were making a profound difference to their water consumption, and if we all adopt them, as we all have started to do, will make a difference to the water consumption for the planet, which is hugely important. But once again, Berlin was 30 years ahead of all the rest of us. It was very impressive to see what this commune and this community were doing. And as I was writing that section earlier today and thinking about it, it occurred to me, if there's anybody in this room in their 30s, if you came from Kreuzberg, I may well have filmed you, because we filmed with a nursery there, and these lovely little children were having to wash their hands, and then we wanted the close-up, so they had to wash their hands again. Then we need the wide shot, and we have to wash their hands again, and they thought that we were nuts. They thought we were completely crazy. But if you know anyone from Kreuzberg who grew up there in the early 90s, say hello from the crazy film director. So, hang on, stretching back over for the speech again. So, why was Berlin so ahead of its time? That's what I've been wondering. And why does that, what can we learn from that the rest of the world and the rest of Europe can benefit from? Now, the first part we don't want to mimic. There was the confinement of the 28 years. East Berlin, it was obvious, the confinement there and the oppression under Soviet rule. But West Berlin was this crazy hub of people who weren't trapped. Of course, they all had travel privileges. They were Westerners. They were part of West Germany. But on the whole, you know, you don't, do you? If it's going to be difficult, you don't take that journey. You don't take that train. If you have to go and get a special visa to leave your town, you just don't go very much. So people tended to stay in Berlin if they were in West Berlin. And I think that confinement helped lead to innovation. I wouldn't recommend confinement to anyone, but I think that we have a saying in Britain, necessity is the mother of invention. And I think that there was a degree of necessity of the invention that came out of that confinement that was quite inspirational. But what's even more inspirational is that you have managed to maintain this. You can't innovate madly without some finance, and somehow the institutions in Berlin, whether they are government institutions or commercial institutions, whether they're educational or inspirational, they've managed to tread that tightrope between enabling innovation and cross-fertilization and not squashing it. Because certainly in the UK, sometimes we have the experience that there's a good idea and the government sees it and they enter in to try and help and they just squash flat the inspiration and there are too many rules, there are too many regulations, there are too many, there's too much ordinariness about it, and so they kill the inspiration. Whereas here, you now have the Berlin Arts University working with the Technical University, and you have the Berlin Open Lab, where innovation is happening day by day. Students are learning and being taught to cross-fertilize. So the importance of having arts and science working together cannot be underestimated for the future. The importance of having diverse minds coming together from different cultures for the future cannot be underestimated. We don't know what future skills we're going to need in 30 years' time. As I say, you look back 30 years, nobody had ever heard of the internet. It just wasn't a word. It wasn't in the dictionaries. Nobody talked about climate change. Now, I was going to give us a cultural reference here saying they weren't even born, but I don't know whether Ed Sheeran means that much to you guys here. I don't know. But Taylor Swift wasn't born. Ed Sheeran wasn't born. Lionel Messi wasn't born. I mean, this was quite a long time ago. So when we are looking 30 years into the future, how can we anticipate? The truth is we can't. So what the experts are telling us, and I'm going over to Chatham House tomorrow to take part in a future skills debate, just to make sure that this is still true. But the experts who I've heard discussing this, the academics, the philosophers, what they say is we need empathy, we need diversity, and we need cross-fertilization between disciplines. We need our arts and our music and our sciences to come together. We need those crazy maker labs like the Fab Lab that's here in Berlin, where young people can go in and try out their ideas on 3D printers. They can try out laser cutting and so on, all of which sounds very technical, but they're going in often as artists, trying to bring an idea to life. So one last cultural reference here. From my part of Berkshire, I know a German artist, a gentleman called Johannes von Stumm. I will give him a plug here. He's a fabulous sculptor. He has a gallery now in Berlin. I think it's Gallery Root. And his work, he's done a series of sculptures where he shapes the air. He shapes space. He builds, carves, sculpts metal and granite to leave the shape of a person inside the space. So he has one famous work called A Couple in Conversation, and it's 15, 20 feet tall, solid, heavy metal, but the shapes of the people are cut out, and they look like they're talking to each other. They look like the minute you turn away, they're going to reach out and touch each other. They are quite remarkable. His other shapes are sometimes sitting and waiting, but what is so fabulous about this is that you find that you're in a gallery, you're in an exhibition space, looking at nothing. And it is completely inspirational. It is the negative space, which is, the negative space somehow inspires you, and it inspires me to think about the way that we can bring art with the material, the technical, the innovative, with the science, together to inspire us all for the future. And I don't think there is anywhere better for doing this at the moment than Berlin. And certainly my artist friend, because of Brexit, has now moved his work to Berlin, because this is where the life and the energy still is. And I tell you, hang on, I've got a good closing line here, but I need to check it. I don't want to go out with a bang, not with a whimper. If you get the right page. We won't put this bit on YouTube, if it's all the same to you. I haven't got the last page. Well, the last page is something like, whatever the future holds, I believe Berlin will be leading us there. Berlin will be in the front wave. I ask you to keep up your cross-fertilization, to keep up your diversity, and to keep up that wonderful interplay between art and science, and do it for us all. Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Judith. What is it about you people from the UK? You're always so good speakers.
Oh.
You really are. You always are. Well, we have any questions for Judith this late hour? Yes.
Thank you, first and foremost, for your words. You talked about innovation, and I don't know how you feel about talking about Brexit. I don't know if you want to talk.
I will talk.
Okay, so
okay.
I was just wondering, because a lot of schools in Great Britain have good reputation internationally, and if I remember that correctly, there's about 500,000 foreign students in UK universities. So how do you think is the possible Brexit going to affect the status of UK schools internationally and also in Britain?
I'm afraid I don't have anything very positive to say about Brexit, except for one main message, and that is that Brexit is not inevitable. I promise I will answer your question, but just to give you my view of how we are at the moment, we've got a general election coming up where the two main parties have lost their moderate members. We have seen moderate Conservatives flooding away from the Conservative Party. We have seen, these are the leaders I'm talking about, and today we saw Tom Watson, one of the deputy leader of the Labour Party, declare that he's not going to get involved in the Brexit fight anymore. He is not standing in the election. So we have two leading parties who are denuded of their moderate leaders, and I think they will be denuded of their moderate voters. So where are they going to go? They will go to the minority parties. Now, in some cases, I think we will benefit. I'm a Liberal Democrat. I think we will do well. I think the Green Party will do well. I fear that the Brexit Party might do better than anyone is expecting. But the upshot is that we will end up with another... Ooh, sorry. The upshot is that we will end up with another hung parliament, and my hope is that that will lead us to a people's vote. And if there is a vote in Britain today, Remain will win. So, coming back to your question, I hope we aren't leaving. I believe we won't be leaving. If we do, it will damage our universities and it will damage our education systems. We won't be shut out entirely from the EU. I believe that there are, certainly in Theresa May's withdrawal bill, there was a reference to plans to keep our top 6 universities involved with the research programs. We'll still be involved with Horizon 2020, at least for the first 5-10 years. Thereafter, though, we depend on the willingness of UK governments to buy in, and there are many things that call on the public purse in the UK, and I fear that international research would dwindle. So I'm sorry, I don't have good news for you. I think it's going to be pretty horrible if it goes ahead. But all I can say to you is please talk to anyone you know in the UK who has a vote and tell them to get out there and help us stop Brexit. Sorry, it's not supposed to be a campaigning session. Any other questions?
Yes, please. We've caught up time, so we have time for your question also. 2 more questions, okay?
You even can answer yes or no. So I'm from Armenia. I'm also from ALDE, from Alliance of Liberal Democratic Party. So I'm member of parliament, a member of ALDE, so like you. You know, we are talking about walls. For me, wall between Great Britain and Ireland was like little broken. I was participated partly there in 1998, which you call Good Friday.
Yes.
It was Belfast Agreement, but repetition was in Lisbon. I was there. So during this all mess, all dispute, high-level dispute about Brexit, I didn't hear voice of people who lived in Northern Ireland. I mean, not significant.
Yes.
What do you? Somebody takes into account voice of people who are there, who had trust, or I don't know, hope in 1998 that one day they will have some solution. Thank you.
That's a very good question. The key players, the individuals from 1998, sadly, Ian Paisley and Martin McGuinness are no longer with us, and I can't believe his name has just disappeared from my mind. Sinn Féin, the guy with the beard, Gerry Adams. He doesn't take part in British politics. It is part of their policy is to keep quiet. So he has not come forward and spoken. In terms of the people in Northern Ireland, there is a wonderful MEP by name of Naomi Long. Write it down, look her up. She speaks very eloquently. And when Boris Johnson did that appalling speech about how he would rather be dead in a ditch than not leave the EU on the 31st of October, she gave a response that was stunning, because she made reference to all the families and the people she knew who had had family members who did die in ditches. And she was saying, how dare he use a metaphor like that when he is talking about making changes to Northern Ireland that could revamp the Troubles. And nobody's making threats, but there's a general understanding that if you put a border in Northern Ireland, it's a very bad thing. And the Good Friday Agreement was a massive triumph, a real triumph, but it came on the back of years and years and years of diplomacy. So it was John Major and Tony Blair. It was Ian Paisley. It was Martin McGuinness. People who I don't agree with their politics, but I truly appreciated their ability to come together and to work together. And as you know, Stormont has now been closed down for some months anyway. We don't have the same calibre of local politicians. Sorry if anyone here is from Ireland. But we don't seem to have people who are able to rise above their divisions. We have the DUP, who have benefited massively from, financially, but now they're being let down by Johnson because he's not helping them to manage in Northern Ireland. So at the moment, we're facing a rather ridiculous situation with a semi-border across the island and a semi-border down the sea. And if I can give you my worst fear, if Brexit happens, we could see the reunification of Ireland. I know that Sinn Féin are looking forward to that if we end up with this border in the sea. We also know that Scotland will have another independence vote, and I won't blame them at all if they all vote to stay in the EU, wouldn't you? But that means that we are looking at the breakup of the UK. And I know that the British people who voted leave did so for their own reasons, and I'm sure some of them think they have good reasons. They are certainly people who have been left behind by current society, by the inequalities in society, but the problems they have suffered are not caused by our membership of Europe. The people I cannot bear to think about are the leaders of the Leave campaigns, and they have commercial interests. They have commercial interests with America, they have commercial interests as hedge fund managers, as investors, and they are putting their own commercial and financial interests ahead of the UK. And we are looking at the first time a nation state may possibly have been brought down by commercial interests. And that makes me sick.
This is so interesting, but I'm sorry, we have to have the last question now. Do you have the microphone? Yeah.
Hello, my name is Maeva.
Hello.
I'm a student here, and I was very interested in the question of cross-fertilizing. You mentioned cross-fertilizing art and science, but from your background, I think as a film producer and as a politician also, how can you cross-fertilize arts and politics? Because we're also at the Cultural Diplomacy Institute.
That's a very, very good question. How can we cross-fertilize arts and politics? I think that would be a good idea, because what I love about art, and I don't know that this is the same thing other people get, is the insight and the empathy and the new point of view. I can tell you, in practical terms, there are art spaces in the European Parliament where we have exhibitions that come every week or two. Sometimes there are exhibitions about campaigns. So it may be a campaign to save elephants, to stop wildlife trafficking, to stop smuggling, and so on. Sometimes they are pure art. And if you or your colleagues have ideas for that, then do please get in touch. Because if we can, wouldn't it be great to have an exhibition of Berlin art taking a view on politics in the European Parliament? I don't know how. I think I would need an artist to tell me how to do that. And if you have ideas, that would be great. But whether it's abstract, emotional, or figurative, or even photographic, I think there are many ways that could help us all and cause politicians to slow down and think a bit more about what they're doing. So it's a lovely idea. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Judith.